Last week's court decision invalidating the stop and frisk law poses a real threat to law enforcement throughout the United States. That's what we'll talk about today. When the U.S. District Court invalidated New York City's stop and frisk law, it not only opened the door to a dramatic resurgence of crime in New York, but in other cities throughout the United States. One of the most troubling things about the court decision was it was not based on the criterion the cops use to stop and to frisk, but was based on the outcome that more blacks and Latinos were stopped and frisked than of whites. So it doesn't matter that the criterion that the cops use in determining who to stop and who to frisk were racially neutral. Things like being in a bad neighborhood at a bad time of day, a corner that was known for drug dealers, dressed in a manner that might suggest that they were up to no good, specifically eliminating race. But the mere fact that a disproportionate number of the people stopped and frisked turned out to be members of a minority group was sufficient for the court to rule the whole program unconstitutional. Which means no matter how fairly and racially neutrally you calibrate it, if the impact is racially disproportionate, it's unconstitutional. And racially disproportionate to what? To the population? Yeah. But to the number of people that commit crimes, to the number of victims, to the proportion of murder victims who are minorities themselves? No, not disproportionate at all. Reflective of that proportion, accurately reflective of that proportion. So if you carry this further, we can jump through all the hoops we want to make sure the entire criminal justice system is fair, okay, racially neutral, as we do. We can make sure that blacks are included on the jury and can't be excluded, and other minorities. We can make sure that the proceedings are conducted without any racial bias. We can scrub the whole thing to be sure that it is clean. And yet if it produces a disproportionate number of convictions of blacks and Latinos, even though they disproportionately commit the crimes, the whole thing could be unconstitutional. This is a very, very dangerous precedent. And let's remember how successful stop and frisk has been. It is so successful that the murder rate in New York City, before it was adopted, was just shy of 2,000 killed a year, and now it's only about 450 killed. And the percentage of deaths by firearms has dropped proportionately, largely because of stop and frisk. It permits an officer to stop someone, frisk them, and if they find a gun, arrest them and bring them to justice under the mandatory minimum sentence of 3 years in prison if they have a firearm. This has almost driven guns off the streets of New York. In fact, in the last 10 years of stop and frisk, only 8,000 guns have actually been confiscated, symptomatic of the fact that drug dealers and gangsters and other criminals are not carrying guns because they know that they could be stopped and frisked and found with a gun and sent to jail for a mandatory minimum sentence. To wipe this entire thing out, which this judge has done with a wave of her wand, really opens the door to a tremendous resurgence of crime in the inner city. Crime used to be the number one problem dividing Americans. It used to be the key issue that generated racism, racial antagonism, and divisiveness within the United States. It was assumed to be an unsolvable problem. And yet, led by New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton, it became a solvable problem and was solved. They were also helped by President Clinton's gun control initiatives and putting 100,000 extra cops on the streets. And as a result of all of this, crime stopped being a major national issue. Well, now thanks to this court decision, if it's not reversed, it could be back. Thanks for watching.